World of Warfare presents
Operation Reunion. When the Soviets swept into Romania in late August of 1944, the subsequent release of 1,162 captured Allied airmen sent a wave of optimism throughout the 15th Air Force, as well as a major morale boost for the American public back home. Operation Gunn, later renamed Operation Reunion, stands to this day as one of the high-water, feel-good moments during the air war in Europe. From the Allies' first bombardment of 7 oil refineries at Ploiești, Romania, in late summer of 1943 until Romania's capitulation, approximately 2,500 British and American airmen have been reported missing in action over the Axis nation. The great majority of these flyers, approximately 2,290, went down during the 15th Air Force's massive offensives against Ploiești from April 5th to August 20th, 1944. Since the bombing raids, 867 of these missing airmen had evaded capture and found their way back to their Italian or British air bases. That left another approximate 1,500 missing airmen, either sitting out the war in Romanian POW camps or continuing to evade capture as they hid in the Romanian countryside. In the first 10 days after Romania's surrender, 3/4 of these missing men were airlifted back to Italy in a rescue effort unparalleled in scope, speed, and overall achievement up until that moment in the war. Operation Reunion would also become the working model for future aerial rescues as Nazi-occupied Europe began to fall to a now overwhelming American presence, both in terms of wartime armament production and determined resolve. Shot down and captured only days prior to Romania's surrender, Lieutenant Colonel James A. Gunn III, CO of the 454th Bomb Group, was the highest-ranking officer held at a Bucharest school facility converted into a POW camp for Allied air officers. Gunn quickly took command of repatriating Allied flyers to their Italian and English air bases, approaching Romanian authorities for permission to fly to Italy to orchestrate the immediate evacuation of Allied POWs. After meeting with the Air Minister and the Secretary of Foreign Affairs, Gunn was granted permission to fly out of Romania on the morning of August 26th, winging his way to Italy in an antique Savoia Marchetti airplane that struggled to stay aloft from the moment his wheels lifted off the ground. An hour after takeoff, Gunn returned with engine trouble. Back in Romania, Gunn encountered a rare character who helped the CO make his way back to Italy. Born a prince, 38-year-old Constantine Cantacuzino was one of those exceptionally gifted men who achieved multifaceted success in a manner few men could equal. Commanding the 9th Fighter Group for the Romanian Air Force, Bazou, as he was known to his friends, cut a dashing figure with his movie star good looks and vibrant personality. Before the war, Bazou had captained the Romanian hockey team, broken an automobile speed record from Bucharest to Paris, and later won a national aerobatic championship that elevated him to superstar status in Romania. Adored by women, according to one of his friends, Bazou had his pick from countesses to cooks. Bazou considered aerial combat to be the ultimate sporting challenge, and by the time of Romania's capitulation, he had already shot down 40 Allied aircraft. In the first few days after Romania's flip to the Allied side, the Germans bombed Romanian cities in retaliation, obliging Bazou to return to air combat, this time shooting down 4 Nazi aircraft in an equal number of days. From August 23rd to the 27th, Bazou seamlessly converted from shooting down Allied aircraft to those of a country and a cause he had served since 1941. With the approval of the Romanian Air Minister, Bazou offered to fly Gunn to Italy in an Me-109, with American flags hastily painted on both sides of the fuselage. Bazou would fly the German fighter, while Gunn was forced to wedge himself inside the plane's tiny radio compartment. The two men took off on the afternoon of August 27th, arriving at Gunn's home field of San Giovanni a few hours later, before an astonished audience of airmen and ground personnel. His plane quickly surrounded by a throng of curious onlookers, Bazou shut down his engine and stood up on his open cockpit seat, announcing that he had a surprise for the men on the ground, provided one of them could supply him with a screwdriver. Once delivered, Bazou removed the plate to the radio compartment, at which point the CO of the 454th emerged from the German fighter to an uproar of wildly cheering men. Gunn immediately flew to Bari to meet with Brigadier General Charles F. Bourne, Director of Operations for the 15th, quickly evolving a plan to evacuate the now liberated airmen in Romania. Operation Reunion was put in place on the 28th of August, with full implementation occurring on the 29th. On that day, 3 fighters flew back to Popesti Airdrome, including Bazou's flag-painted 109, who landed at the airdrome to confirm that the facility remained firmly in Allied hands. Once confirmed, Bazou fired a signal flare up into the air, which alerted his 2 escorts to climb to altitude so that they could relay a thumbs-up all-clear message to a weather recon plane flying over Yugoslavia. The thumbs-up all-clear message was then relayed to 15th Headquarters at Bari. Once the green light was given, 2 B-17s headed for Popesti Airdrome with an escort of 32 Mustangs. On board the bombers were a party of OSS officers with multiple sets of high-frequency, long-distance radios. The airborne group included Colonel George Krager from MAAF headquarters, who had spearheaded a multi-month rescue of airmen evading capture in the Balkans, particularly in Chechen-held territories. Landing back at Popesti Airdrome, the group was met by Rika Georgescu, Secretary of State and Minister of National Economy. They then flew to Bucharest and set up operations in a private residency, but for some reason the group's radios failed to punch a signal back to Bari with an update that the forward evacuation team was in place and ready. On August 30th, Bazou flew back to Italy to inform 15th leadership of the mission's state of readiness, at which point the airlift was set to begin the following day. Since the American rescuers were unfamiliar with the airfields around Bucharest, Bazou agreed to lead the first rescue mission into Romania. During his stay at the 31st Fighter Group's San Severo Air Base, Bazou let a Mustang pilot fly his Me-109 with disastrous results that destroyed his plane. In need of a replacement aircraft to lead the airlift pilots back into Romania, he was offered a spare Mustang and given a brief checkout on the ground. Within minutes after his brief schooling was done, he was airborne in the P-51, giving 31st Airmen on the ground an eye-watering demonstration of aerial acrobatics. Said one witness to the event, he landed the Mustang as if he had flown it all his life. Meanwhile, back in Bucharest, Colonel Krager organized the mass movement of Allied POWs back to Popesti Airdrome for their impending airlift back to Italy. He located about 800 airmen in a makeshift encampment outside the city, where they had been relocated after surviving heavy German bombardment near the city center. Krager located an additional 100 POWs from the distant city of Rosica, which is now part of Bulgaria. Transport was a dicey proposition until the Romanian government requisitioned 27 buses to move the freed airmen 14 miles to the Popesti airfield. Once the airmen arrived on base, Krager sent a truck to bring in food and drinks for the men, staging airmen in groups of 20 men, each with a designated CO, grouped in 150-foot intervals along the taxiway. In this manner, when the hastily modified heavy bombers arrived, each big friend could stop before a group of men, take them on board and be airborne with the least amount of delay. For Operation Reunion, 56 B-17s from the 2nd and 97th Bomb Groups were fitted with special racks that could accommodate passengers in and around their bomb bay and waist. 2 were equipped to carry men on stretchers who were otherwise too sick or injured to ride in an upright manner. They flew in 3 waves of 12 bombers at 1-hour intervals, limiting their ground time to no more than 15 minutes for refueling and intake of their airmen passengers. Within one of the first bombers to arrive rode 2 doctors who were driven to a deplorable excuse for a hospital, where they immediately began treatment on 39 Allied airmen in various states of physical illness or injury. Once the men were stabilized, they were flown back to Italy on a priority basis. A total of 739 Allied POWs were evacuated on August 31st, including 10 leadered patients and 29 seated patients. On September 1st, Reunion 2 put up 1 flight of 16 fortresses, evacuating 393 POWs, including hospital attendants and 12 more ambulatory patients. On September 2nd, while Krieger conducted farewell diplomacy meetings with Georgescu, Prime Minister Sănătescu, and President Mândru, a few more straggling Allied airmen came in from various locations around Budapest. 19 additional airmen were still in their old prison camp when Soviet troops began to fill the camps with German prisoners, while other freed airmen had been invited into the homes of wealthy Romanians, primarily to use as foils against foreseen Russian requisitions. These later men, happily enjoying luxuries previously denied them during their imprisonment, had to be ordered to Popesti for Reunion 3, which occurred the following day. The final airlift on September 3rd consisted of 3 fortresses and 1 C-47 Skytrain, which airlifted 29 POWs and Colonel Krieger back to Italy. 2 physicians remained behind with Peter Tierney, who was too ill to travel, along with the OSS team whose radios remained doggedly inoperable. By the close of Operation Reunion, 15th Airmen flew 59 Fortress sorties, 94 Lightning sorties, 281 Mustang sorties, and 1 C-47 sortie to airlift the entire population of Allied POWs back to Italy. The evacuation list included 1,127 American, 31 British, 2 Dutch naval officers, a French sergeant, and 1 Romanian stowaway with shaky claims to American citizenship. Of the Americans, the 15th saw the return of 445 officers and 608 enlisted men, while the 8th and 9th Air Forces saw the return of 30 officers and 44 enlisted aviators. While we circled the field, we could see a line of men formed on the ground in groups of about 20, recalled Charles E. Grafton, who participated in the airlift. We taxied up to the men and they began waving and shouting in their joy to see us. The crewmen, some held prisoner for over a year, were dressed in motley uniforms of all descriptions. Some sported German helmets, German and Romanian uniforms, long and wicked-looking knives, fancy belts, scarves, colorful pants, and shirts. Some had long beards, but apparently all were in good health. One sergeant lugged a complete German machine gun, and another was carrying 2 unopened boxes of German hand grenades. We got to the airport and waited several hours before the first group of P-51s came over, recalled POW Marshall and Sams of the 450th Bomb Group. They gave us a terrific buzz job and circled the field as the first flight of B-17s arrived. What a feeling to see those planes. The forts circled the field once, dropped their gear, and came in for a landing. I can imagine how the men on the planes felt, landing on territory that they used to bomb. The first several hundred men scrambled aboard, and the planes took off almost immediately. I held my breath as each one of them climbed into the air. A half hour later, the next group of bombers, with their escort of P-38s arrived. I was to be on one of these, a ship whose bombs painted on the fuselage showed that it had been on 75 missions. I hoped that it would get to make the 76th soon. I crawled up to the nose and looked around, then back onto the specially built floor of the bomb bay for takeoff. Yes, I sweated this takeoff, but not as much as the two fighter pilots with us on their first ride in a bomber. As we were circling to gain altitude and get in formation, I crawled back up to the nose, not wanting to miss the last of Romania. Then on to Bucharest, crossing the Danube River, which was as muddy as always. It all looked familiar and yet so strange. I kept getting up and looking out the Astrodome. The P-38s crisscrossing above us was a beautiful sight. On and on over the flat country and then the mountains of western Bulgaria and Yugoslavia. Then after what seemed hours, we saw the Adriatic Sea. On the other side was Italy. The escort had now left us and we were safe from enemy action. Then Italy came into view. I had never seen it look so nice and peaceful. Back to the bomb bay as we circled for landing. We finally hit the ground and rolled to a stop. We piled out of the ship to face newsreel cameras and 15th Air Force men who seemed as happy to see us back as we were to get back. Italian ground felt mighty good. Then onto the trucks where we waited to hear General Nate Twining welcome us back. A major told us that we would go to get clean clothes and a bath. We were a sorry-looking bunch of men. We were going to be deloused, and that was the best news of all. The end of the lice would mean the end of Romanian prison souvenirs for us. United States, here we come.